introduce myself. I'm Marty DeVries, and I'm your current chairman of the board of directors here at Sandy Pines. I will formally introduce Dave Healy, our keynote presenter today, but I wanted to provide you a brief history around the development and the next steps of this Capital Reserve Fund initiative. About two years ago, this initiative began in our long-range planning committee. We began discussing a more proactive approach to Sandy Pines, calling it a preservation plan or initiative. We began that process with our park president, Jean Van Koevering. And in years past, if you remember, whenever there was a project that required funding, typically it was presented to the members in an assessment proposal. And there were many projects in the past, thus numerous assessments. Well, we concluded in our long-range planning committee that we had never had a very good, proactive, detailed plan for the future of our park. And so we started calling it the Preservation Plan, and it evolved into the Capital Reserve Fund. The information that you'll be presented today has been reviewed again, tweaked, touched again and again by different people in the park. One of the biggest projects that you will see outlined in this entire plan today is the building that we call the Golden Onion, the indoor pool and adult recreation. We requested an engineering firm to come in to provide a thorough assessment of this facility several years back. And in 2014, the Long Range Planning Committee considered replacing this facility based on the return engineering report. And we also were made aware of the ongoing expenses of that 40-year-old building and the structure that has now become pretty operationally insufficient. The engineering firm indicated in their report that we structurally had about 2 to 3 years left in that building. So if you recall, the Long Range Planning Committee last October 2015, we put out a survey about that building. We wanted to see what members wanted us to do about that building, and if we wanted to include it in the Capital Reserve Fund, and it looked similar to what it does today, we would keep it in this Capital Reserve, 10-year Capital Reserve Fund plan. The survey was directed at obtaining member feedback about that replacement, and it indicated in the survey findings that the amenities are about the same that we have today. Some of the members, or the top 5 initiatives in that survey talked about ranking those items. And so the survey results were really, really good. If you recall this past May at our board meeting a month ago, Raj Grinwis talked about the pleasing results of 977 members that responded to that survey. The results of the survey, which will be provided to the membership soon, included the indoor pool. Members indicated that they wanted it somewhat larger, a little bit deeper on one end with 0 entry. An adult recreation or relaxation spot with Wi-Fi, a food retail outlet, and an additional indoor pool seating, some bigger space for indoor seating around the pool. And some of these are the top ranked wishes of the membership. We also made a decision to gain some knowledge and expertise from an outside consulting firm. So we invited a company called ProNexus to assist with this process. The plan was again reviewed by many eyes, again and again in the Long Range Planning Committee, and then it was presented to the combined finance and last year's board towards the end of the season. We wanted the presentation to be such that it would ultimately preserve our park over the next year, the next 5 years, and into the future. So let me define what is capital. Capital is any asset that you can walk up to or into, a building, a pool, tennis courts, etc. It also includes things that you do not see, like septic fields, water wells, electric, gas, water lines, etc. And what is reserve? Reserve is collected money that is scheduled for specific use. It's a reserve that's in an account set aside, separate account set aside by an individual or a business to meet any estimated or unexpected costs that may arise in the future, as well as the future costs of upkeep. Given the fact that the board today will be revealing what the funds would be used for, the term reserve may be misnomer in the light of the fact that the funds will be designated to certain expected expenses as shown on this 10-year repair and replacement document. In fact, the projections for the next 10 years reveal that Sandy Pines will need to have a line of credit to fill in for those years where there will not be sufficient funds available due to the short period of time that the reserve fund has been implemented. You may ask, why change? I would answer that it's the responsibility to take care of the stuff that we currently have in our park, to protect it, to maintain it, and to preserve all of the stuff that we have here in our park. You may ask, why do we need to do this now? Well, for Sandy Pines to continue to be a premier park in the state and one of the most highly regarded parks in the nation, it's now time to shift from the construction mode that we've been in for the past 40 years to a preservation mode. Taking care of the legacy of this park has become one of our projects by preparing to repair and replace those assets that attract families to this place and support the value of our individual investments. Our primary purpose here today is to allow the members a thorough review of the initiative. The Capital Reserve Fund ballot language is being finalized. It will be voted on next Friday night at the open session board meeting. And the next steps will be, if that ballot language is approved by the board next Friday, the Capital Reserve Fund proposal will be placed on the August 20 ballot for a member vote. So if you've been involved in the Finance Committee, Long Range Planning Committee, or previous board, would all of you stand that where you've provided input to this plan? Any Finance Committee members, previous board, and our Long Range Planning Committee? I want to thank each of you for your input and your contribution to making this plan come to fruition today. Dave Healy, who is our keynote presenter today, is currently a business consultant with ProNexus LLC. It's a national firm specializing in accounting and information technology. Dave is a certified public accountant and a certified management accountant with an account degree from Michigan State University and work experience with PricewaterhouseCoopers, Ernst & Young, plus 15 years as Chief Financial Officer for Schupan & Sons Incorporated. Dave also understands the rewards and the challenges of working for the citizens of a community. He has served as chairman of the Van Buren County Board of Commissioners and supervisor for Texas Township. During his service, he was a key factor in those governmental units receiving state recognition for many of their efforts. The most recent was the Michigan Transportation Asset Management Council, when they named Texas Township as the 2011 Organization of the Year for its efforts in road preservation. Dave has been involved in hundreds of cost studies and budgets, including those involved in starting, buying, selling, and sustaining organizations. He's also developed the financial projections for the pickup and processing system for all returnable beverage containers in the state of Michigan. He led the development of a 10-year maintenance plan for 28 miles of roads in Texas Township. He has done budgets and sustainability plans for businesses, nonprofits, governments, and schools. Dave and his wife Renee reside in Kalamazoo. He grew up in Gobles, Michigan, and his family had a lot here at Sandy Pines in the 70s. He is excited to be able to help us to continue the legacy of Sandy Pines. I would also add that I'm honored to introduce Dave Healy. He's someone that has worked with us in the Long Range Planning Committee, and he was the presenter to the combined Finance, Long Range Planning, and the board last year of this exact plan. So Dave Healy, welcome, and we thank you for taking your time to support our efforts here at Sandy Pines. And with that, could you help me welcome Dave Healy?
Thank you, Marty, for that kind introduction. And I'll start with, I apologize that you folks behind me might want to move over at this point if you want to be able to see the screen. It is my pleasure to be here and to represent ProNexus in this effort. Marty did an excellent job of kind of laying the groundwork of what this is all about. I've been through this once before, and one of the things that Marty mentioned that kind of uniquely qualifies me for helping you with this project is our project in Texas Township, where we had a similar issue where we recognized, and that's step one, is recognize a problem a potential problem, one that's coming at you. In our case, it was roads deteriorating, and we weren't investing enough to keep up with those roads, so it's kind of getting pushed out. And as you've probably been hearing from the state of Michigan, as they sort of catch up with this, if you don't take care of it now, then it's going to cost you more to take care of it later. So we proactively went out there and educated the population as to what we were trying to do. We gave them a lot of detail as to why it was important to do this, why it's important to spend a little bit of money now to save money later and preserve the road system that we have. And through that project, out of 4,000 parcels, we had one person that appealed that decision to the tax tribunal, and they lost. But 1 out of 4,000, obviously, we were able to satisfy people that it was the right thing to do. The way we did that was through education. That's what we're doing here today. This is all about educating you as to what we're doing, why we're doing it, why it's important, and to share with you as much detail as we think you would possibly ever want, so that you can feel comfortable that this is the right thing to do. So it's all about education. So with that, just a moment to proceed to the presentation.
Raise it up. Higher, raise it up.
Yes, I'll apologize for that. And let's see if this gets better, because I think we had this all worked out. Oh, I know where it is, excuse me. We had to adjust it for the pictures as best we could. And now I'm going to put it back to plus, because we actually had that figured out. Okay. Can everyone see that reasonably well? Okay. Then we're going to start out with talking about a little bit about the leadership that we have today. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the financial picture and the financial condition at Sandy Pines. Then we'll talk about the specific needs. I'm going to talk about them first in general, and then we'll get into detail. Then we'll talk about the investment proposal. Everyone always wants to go to the back page and see what the big number is. That's where this is. And then we'll talk about how that's going to be implemented. So in terms of today's leadership, one of the things that's happening is you've got good oversight going on. You've got member involvement, which is key. You've got better communications going on now than have been in years past. The managers obviously are being proactive. That's why we're here today. And you're getting some improved service levels in all areas. The boards are providing better oversight, receiving more timely, meaningful information. You've got over 120 members involved in 12 committees that are addressing these needs. So the whole key to this is it's driven by you, the members. So it's not just that vote, but it's the active participation in these committees, because it's the work that takes place in these committees that kind of put that whole list together, reviewed the list in detail, and that list is what came up to the total amount we're trying to raise here. Those committees ensure that the policies that you've got in the park are being enforced. They ensure that the operations are following the budget guidelines that have been established, and you'll see where this plays out in just a moment. They're able to identify and address the issues sooner. Obviously, when you have more eyes looking at things and responding, reacting, and communicating, you're going to be able to address the issues before they become bigger. Committees communicate with each other better. Again, that's just part of good management. With Gene coming on, you got a new president with a new approach to how things should be run and how we're going to address the needs of the community. One of the things you see is his focus on preserving what we have for the future and not on adding more or new amenities. And when we get into the details of how the money is to be raised and spent, you're going to see exactly what I'm talking about here. One of the other things that's happening that didn't happen to the same extent in the past is looking for outside opportunities for funding and collaboration. For example, he's been talking to FEMA for the storm sirens to see if we can get some opportunities for funding there and through their programs. Some of the self-power opportunities, revenue opportunities, and enhanced service opportunities. One of the things you're seeing, and I've already touched on, is the very increased focus on communications to make sure that people are talking. And that includes among the various committees and the Sandy Pine Board to make sure that, again, not only are we identifying issues, but those are rolling up to decision makers and actions being taken. Also the members. That's what the face-to-face meetings are all about. That's what this meeting is all about. It's all about making sure that people know what's going on, because it just makes life run much smoother than some face-to-face in this meeting. The area managers are attentive. You're seeing service levels improving in all various areas: rangers, recreation activities, park and garden, maintenance. Seeing efficient management has led to $1.5 million surplus over the last several years. And you're going to see this, I guess, how does that play into all these numbers? Why don't you use that? You'll see in just a moment. Talking about the financial strength. This is a snapshot. I picked the key parts of your balance sheet from the reviewed financial statements. These are reviewed by an independent CPA firm. So these are external numbers, essentially, or they're our numbers, but they've been reviewed by an external third party. The keys here, that top line of current assets, that's primarily membership receivables as well as cash and reserves. This other assets is pretty much the value of the assets, the investments that we've made over the years, minus depreciation. So that number continues to go down a little bit as depreciation is recorded. It goes back up as you make investments. So you can see, for example, just dropping down from 16 to 14 here. That's simply depreciation. Some assets are dropping off, and there have been investments here that keep it up at that level. Overall, assets are at this level. Your fund balance is pretty much close to that. The current liabilities are your only liabilities, leaving you this total equity. That's what the balance sheet shows. It's a very strong balance sheet. One of the things that people look at, any financing institution looks at, Marty talked about a line of credit, that based on this level of strength, if you do go to a bank, it'll be a pretty low interest rate. It'll be considered one of the stronger credit risks. So that's positive. Current ratio is a factor of this current assets compared to current liabilities. Working capital is the subtraction of liabilities from that. The ratio is the ratio of those two. Generally, a 3 or 4 is pretty strong, so you can see that you guys are in a good, solid position financially at Sandy Pines. Talking about tomorrow's needs, this is where we get into what this is all about. When we look at that total list that I'll show you, we'll go over in a few minutes in detail to make these numbers up. When you look at most of it, it's maintenance and replacement of existing assets. Okay, so even that replacement building, you've got an asset there now, you're going to replace it with something else. You know, that's in this category right here. We broke that down further into delayed versus planned. The delayed are the things that have been continually pushed out, things that we would like to have done. We would like to have taken care of these things earlier, but the money wasn't there. There's been a lot of that money juggling going on in an effort to just keep up with what we have been doing. But there's a lot of investment that needs to be made sooner rather than later, and you'll see that when we get into how the spending plan is laid out. The other $5.4 million that you see there, the other half of that is basically stuff that has been identified as something that will need to be done, it's just scheduled out over the next 10 years. New assets, there's only 144,000 of new stuff. And by new stuff, that's stuff that you don't have now. I think one of the items on there are cameras for the police, the security people. It's stuff like that. There's not a lot when you look at that being a 10-year period. Rental, the 1.2 million that you see there, those are the assets that are rented out. So these generate income. That income shows up in your operating side. So that kind of pays for itself. It pays for itself on your operating side, keeping your dues down and allowing the organization to sustain itself with a revenue item over there. But it takes that investment over the next 10 years in order to maintain that. 4 numbers over these slides that I want you to keep in mind as we go through it. And the average per year, let's see, I think it's the next 4. The average per year investment, almost $12 million, is $1.1 million. When we look, so that $1.1 million is, keep an eye on it. Stay focused on it. That's one of the 4 numbers. When we look at the spending history that has gone on, these are the last 5 years, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, last 5 years of actual spending. So you can see there's kind of, it's not totally even because in some years they would save up in order to spend the next year, and then so you have some up and down in an effort to take care of some of the larger expenditures. The comparison that I'm making here is to your total capital and operating dues. So as a percent of your total dues collected for capital and operations, you've been spending, you can see the fluctuation year to year. When you look at the 5-year average, that's about 23%, 3 million out of 13. And on an average basis, these are the 4 numbers I want you to remember. 613,000 is the average investment that has been made over the last 5 years. 613,000. So of the 4 numbers, that's the first one. When we look at the capital dues history, the amount that's been collected, you can see that that's been relatively steady. A little spike here. Average 2.4 million. That's 18% of that total. These are the same numbers. So the collection of dues is 18% versus the 23% that they were spending. What's the difference? They were taking it out of the general fund. So they were taking some of that money out of the general fund to make up the difference. That 481 compares to the 620 we're just looking at. 613 we're just looking at. So 613 was what was being spent. 481 is what you were actually paying for in capital dues. This is the capital dues plan. We increase as the dues what we're talking about. Then we collect this much per year. Average ends up being about 32% of what you're paying in. That's about 1.12 million that's being spent per year on average. When you look at the total operating capital dues over the last 6 years that you're up there, you can see how things have played out in terms of operating and capital. Here's the new numbers. This is the big reveal that everyone's been asking about is how much are we talking about here? How much money are you going to increase my dues by in order to do all these things? And that 325 is what makes up the difference between what you're paying now and what we need in order to take care of these this capital investment. When you look at just the capital and operating dues over, I think this goes back all the way to 2003, looking at just capital and operating dues that you've been charged, and where we started back here in 03, you can see that the lines are identical. Dues has tracked inflation. The cost of living has been the only increase in those two. This does not take into consideration those special assessments that Marty talked about. So when you have something come along and how you got an additional charge for 5 years, 4 years, whatever it was. This doesn't look at that. This is just looking at your operational dues and capital dues. That part of it being collected. Looking ahead, over the next, I picked the next 5 years. We're going to go into 10 years of detail, but just to show you the next 5 years, of that just under 12 million, you can see that we're proposing to spend almost 9 million of that in the first 5 years. That's because you saw that 5 million of delayed expenses, things that have been pushed out. We want to address those in the first 5 years. And so that's why you've got a larger number in the first 5 years. Average spending, $1.7 million per year. Substantially larger than what we were looking at a moment ago in historical spending. This number, I just wanted to point out here, this 3.5 million, one of the things that's dues collected, the board has voted to invest an additional $1 million in terms of transfer from general fund in order to kick this off and help us with that substantial investment right there in the first 5 years. So that's a big chunk. When you saw, and you have to point this out, I'm going to back up just a little bit to show you where that $1.5 million is coming from. This financial strength, when you see the growth in working capital from 2.4, 2.1, 2.8 in these last few years, you can see an increase in that working capital. Remember a few slides previous to this, I had showed you that I made a comment that management has saved $1.5 million through their improved monitoring and just better management. That's what's causing this increase in working capital, and that's why they're able to take $1 million out of that and put it toward the capital investment campaign. Okay, 8.7 average, and now the capital spending for the second 5 years, the average there, the total is only going to be the balance of the $12, so a little over $3 million coming into the last 5 years. That average is about $636,000 a year, so you can see a big disparity in terms of dollars going out. And if you remember the comparison of dollars coming in versus spent, so we're overspending the first several years, first 5 years, and underspending the last 5 years. When you look at that on a graph, if you look at this straight line right here, that represents cumulative numbers. So, in total, you're getting a steady line, the same amount per year for that 10 years. The spending, you've got the $1 million taken in here to keep it down, but then you see after a couple of years the spending increasing relative to what's being taken in. So that difference right there is a shortfall. That's what Marty was talking about when she said we make it into a line of credit to fund that shortfall. Okay, and whether we fund that from an outside line of credit, or we fund it internally through borrowing from ourselves, essentially from that previous working capital, that's a decision that the board can make, as they get closer to the time. So no determination is made yet, but we've identified the amount that we would be talking about to do that. And I'll show you the interest costs associated with that in a moment as well. In fact, let me take you to the detail behind all the numbers. And let's get into some of that detail. Here's that $11.9 million. And bring this over just a little bit. Okay, so as we look at that, this is your handout as kind of this summary. There's your almost $12 million. The detail, you can see maintenance department has the big numbers, so I break that out. And you can see, I think this is what's on your spreadsheet, where you see what's in roofs and mechanical and tile and structural. right there is one of the big numbers. And when you get into structural, then you get into the detail behind it, and that structural 4.4 million consists of these numbers. By the way, if you notice, every number that you've seen has got lots of detail behind it. I try not to blind you with lots of numbers all at once, but every one of those numbers is supported by this level of detail. So this, you can see there the 4.43 million. You can see every number, every project, behind that, that totals that $4.3 million under structural. The biggest one on there is the $2.7 million for replacing the adult rec indoor pool. And you can see exactly when that's proposed to be spent out here in 2020 and 2021. It's split over 2 years, 1.375 million in both years. So again, you can see the detail, and this goes all the way out to 2026. So you can see every expenditure that is detailed out, when it's planned to be spent, and the amount that is estimated. A lot of detail, a lot of work went into all of this. So we want to collapse that just so you can get a, I'll show you another area, the other area total, the big number there, when you look at 3.29 million, okay, what makes that up? Here's all the things that are in that other category. I get broken down. Every single asset, every, when it's planned to be spent. Biggest item on here is the road resurfacing, which is right here about $2 million, and that's spending about $250,000 a year. I think that's pretty much going forward for a number of years. They spread that out. Just one of the things that took place in this whole process is, we challenged every number on here, and that used to be around $4 million. And, we tightened it up and identified ways to get that down to a $2 million number that we think is realistic. And one of the pieces of that is some of the road preservation techniques that you've seen, the crack sealing going on around the park. You probably see more lines on the asphalt than you've seen in the past. That's one way of preserving assets. It's the most effective way is to do as much of that as you can. Keep the road sealed up so that it doesn't break up and crumble more. And that's one of the things that enable us to lower that estimate. So as I say, I could spend a lot of time right now going through all these line items, and after the meeting, if anyone wants to stay and drill down and look at this in more detail, then I'll be here. We can let everyone vacate once that's seen enough of the detail. Those who want to stick around and see detail can move to the front, and then we can go with as much of the detail as you like right now. Or this will be also available at the office. So if you want to talk to Gene or Kimberly, you can come in and they can help you understand some of these assets as well as the other board members that have been through it, because they've seen all the detail behind this. But again, the impressive thing is understanding that all these numbers that you're looking at have detail behind them and are they're not just willy-nilly. Now, looking at the total on the bottom line, you see 1.9 million expenditure, 1.46. All of this adds up to the first 5 years. That $8 million roughly, and then the next 5 years, the smaller numbers, the 3 million-ish. Let me show you what that looks like graphically. Well, let me go down to a little bit more detail. When you look at the capital expenditures per member, okay, there's the expenditures per member. You can see that's front-end loaded, where 17. You know, 1,700, and then you got the two big buildings out here kicking in a big number. So those are just looking at expenditures per person if you want to. When you look at the total picture, the cash being generated through all of this, talking about at 325. These are the dollars that will generate. And you can see the dues are going to generate $11 million, and the cash generated, they get the other million coming in. Total is going to be generated 12.26 million over the 10 years. When you look at how that plays out, comparing that amount generated to the amount that, the cumulative amount, I guess that's the way of saying it, then we start here with what we've got today accumulated. I think we're starting out with about 150,000 in the bank right now. That's capital, designated for capital expenditures. So if we start with that, so that's, I don't have that there. Beginning capital cash balance. I don't have a beginning cash balance. We did it one time. Marty, what is that number? Is it about 150 or is it 250? But there is some money right here. We'll drop that in. Let's call it 250 because I think that's the number. And this is PowerPoint, so it's not going to carry forward to our description.
Just less than 250,000.
250,000? Okay. There. Now it's back in there. So with that 250,000 in there, we start out with 250. The change from what we, difference between what we collected and what we spent. Remember, here's the amount I said generated, including $1 million. Compare that to the amount being spent with 1.9. They actually increase the fund balance by 150,000 in the first year. And then what we got 400 coming forward. The next year, we're going to spend more than we take in by 345,000. So the fund, starting with this 398 from the prior year, we now are down to about $53,000 balance. Next year, we're going to spend less than we take in. So now our balance is back up to 440. Carrying forward the beginning balance, we're at 500 almost. Then the big expenditures come through in 2020, where we spend about $1.1 million more than we take in. So now you are about 600,000 in the hole. So now this is where that graph I showed you a moment ago starts getting some area under it. Of course, that represents borrowing. Same thing happens the next year, and this goes on for all 10 years where we projected that out with that transaction. And you get out to 2026 before you actually have a positive fund balance being carried forward. So that now it continues forward for the investments that are identified by the board as you proceed along. So you're going to continue to identify additional investments that need to be made. You're going to, at the end of 10 years, with what we propose, you should end up with $500,000 to start addressing that. So we shouldn't be coming back to you, theoretically, with, hey, we need more money because we're proactively addressing it. As we go through this whole thing, we've made lots of estimates. There will be inflation. There will also be pleasant surprises. If Gene comes through with some additional funding through one of these grants for something that's on here, then suddenly that gives us more money available. On the other hand, if we find that some of these assets have to be moved up a year, some of these investments have to be moved up a year because something is in worse shape than we originally thought, then okay, we can just move the assets around a little bit to balance it out. If an estimate comes in higher, that has a negative impact, but we reduce expenditures. It's all about managing the detail. You've got a lot of different assets in here that can be managed. Your management team is going to be looking at this every single year to approve next year's expenditures. Here's the preliminary approval of the next, or preliminary picture of the next 10 years. Each year this is going to get looked at, reviewed, and updated. But this is pretty good detail, and this is not expected to, have major swings in it. This is kind of something you haven't done in the past. This is the biggest thing that's different about this, is that you're taking a proactive approach and looking out for the next 10 years and trying to smooth the spending out so you don't have surprises. so that you basically you can predict not only when things are gonna happen, but what it's gonna cost. So that's what this whole program is trying to achieve. And that's the end result, is getting down to positive balance at the end of 10 years. If you want to look at the total picture, people want to say, okay, but I've got other things going on here. My whole presentation has been on the operating dues and capital, that piece of it. These 3 lines, that piece right there. I've not been talking about your cable or your electric or the golf. Those are different things, handled separately, addressed separately. We're only talking about these 3 things, or these things. Let me go back to my PowerPoint. Another way of looking at this graph, keep in mind this, you saw the spending versus the collection. When you look at this, and take this back up. Okay, another way of looking at those numbers that we were just seeing is this line right here, this straight line, is the dues per year. So each year you're collecting that amount of dues. Okay, this line is the expenditures. Okay, and then you have pictures of these graphs, but that's the expenditures per year, kind of going up and down. So it's above, it's below, it's above, it's below. This is where you're paying it back. When you look at the fund balance, that line item that I showed you a moment ago that showed the positive and negative amount and the borrowing and so forth, you can see that this is positive. This line right here represents 0. So you start out with that couple hundred, 250,000, I think it was, and then you soon go negative, but then you go positive, and then the big buildings come in and it goes negative. Okay, and it's negative, and that's your borrowing right there. And each year you can see that that gets lower because, as you can see here, you've now, each of those years, these last 5 years, you're collecting more than you're spending, so that difference is what is paying this down and getting you back to a point that when you get out to the end of the 10 years, you're now positive, you've got a few bucks left at the end of the day. Okay, so you've taken care of all your debt, you've actually started to build a little reserve fund, and that's what this graph is telling you. And this assumes that the proposal that we have in front of you passes. If you try to implement the investments that we talked about, taking care of all those buildings and all the projects that are detailed, if you try to do that without this additional funding, these 2 lines are the same as the previous graph. Scale has had to change because we're not getting into much bigger numbers for this line, because it starts out here and it starts going quickly negative and it keeps going negative, negative, negative. You're down here in borrowing of over $6 million, $6.4 million at the end of 10 years. I mean, that starts in 2025 with the buildings and it just stays negative. The historical dues that you have in place right now aren't able to sustain that investment that we were just showing you. That's why the board is coming to you. That's why this whole project of educating you is taking place. It's to help you understand that if we want to preserve what we have at Sandy Pines, then it's going to take an investment greater than what you presently have. I think you recognize that, okay, we've been doing it differently in the past. We had the special assessments. This gets rid of those. This gets us a predictable amount for the next 10 years. If you want to make sure you know, has everyone met? You probably haven't because she's fairly new. Kimberly? Kimberly is the new CFO at Sandy Pines. Sharp gal, good experience, and she's going to have all these spreadsheets, this PowerPoint, and so forth. And she can go through that spreadsheet with anyone that likes. So you've got all of this right here in the office if you would like to go over it at any time. So here's her contact information, but you know you can get everything off us. What happens next? There's going to be some additional, well, we've got another meeting tonight, 5 o'clock to 7, is that it? And then there'll be additional face-to-face meetings on July 2nd and July 23rd. At those meetings, that's another opportunity for you to dig into the detail, ask additional questions. So this is when and where. On August 26th, you're going to have your ballot vote. If that's approved, then you begin the detailed capital improvements that I was just showing you next year. Department managers and management will be annually reviewing, as I mentioned, that capital program to make sure the priorities are as they should be. Any changes that are made to that will be going before the Finance Committee and then to the board, probably the other committees involved as well, and we'll bring it to the surface. So that's the process that will help you enjoy life at Sandy Pines. So with that, I'll open up to any questions that you have. And yes, sir.
What kind of inflationary rate did you use for the 10-year projection?
None. Good point. Thank you for bringing that up.
Could we repeat the question so everybody can hear
The
it?
question was, did we build in inflation to this? And no, we did not. Number of reasons. One, I can't tell you what it is. Two, there's going to be a lot of movement. When you're talking inflation, you're talking hopefully only a couple of % per year, and you're going to have more variation than that in some of the estimates for construction or the like. So you've already got inflation built in on the cost of living. We have the cost of living applied. The cost of living would apply to the 325 as well as the 200. Is that correct or not?
Yes.
Yes. So the cost of living does apply, just like all the other rates. In the numbers I showed you here, it didn't. I didn't build that into any of these projections, just because of it. So backing up, inflation will apply. The same cost of living adjustment applies to your current operating and capital. That will apply to the additional $325. That increase hopefully will take care of any increases in cost of projects that are on there. It's when you get out and start talking 2%, there's just 8 years from now, it's hard to get real tight on that.
I have a second question. If the proposal is approved and the rate of increase is approved in the dues, will the park still need a line of credit during some of the years to meet the goals of what is proposed?
I showed you the impact of what we have proposed right now. And in that you see this red dip right here, or another way to look at it is this gap right there. And whichever one you want to look at, there is a shortfall because we're going to be spending money before we have collected it all. And primarily it's driven by the two big projects, those buildings. So I told you I would show you the amount of interest associated with that. And I didn't do that when I had that spreadsheet up. But the amount of interest calculation is, don't glare on me. Interest borrowed, there. This interest borrowed and shortfall, you can see when we get out here, those are the numbers per year to cover the cost of interest for that shortfall if we were to go out on the market. So that's not an astronomical number. And in reality, I think that you'll probably have a strong enough, when I showed you the balance sheet, you probably got enough here to cover a lot of the borrowing that you would need to do, perhaps not all of it, but a large part of it. So you'd be borrowing from yourself, and I would assume the board will give you a real good interest rate. So, left pocket, right pocket. So you may not even incur this level of interest expense. Yes, sir.
what is the amount of money borrowed and what is the proposed interest rate that you calculated it with?
Okay. The amount borrowed is that negative number, ending cash balance that you see right here. So it's positive, positive, it goes negative in 2020. 600, 1.8, 1.5, and then it starts dropping down. So the highest number that I've got is about 1.9 million. The interest rate that I've got factored into that, if I can see in my cell, I can't, so I need to jump out of this so that I can read the cell. And right there, what that says is F186. F186, bear with me, we're doing the spreadsheet here, folks.
While Dave's looking for that, I just want to say that we have had contact with a bank that we do business with now, and they're very interested in borrowing us money, basically because our balance sheet is as strong as it is. So, but additionally, we have a good cash reserve from operations that part of which is invested, long-term invested. So it would be up to the board if they were to change that at all. But beyond that amount, we hope to continue to generate surpluses that could go toward the borrowings. But either way, I don't think we're going to have a problem covering the red line during those times.
And the answer to the other part of the question is 3%. And if that changes to 6%, then we can look at the impact it has and see that it's, if I can get out there on it. There we go. The numbers still don't become astronomical. You get in those biggest years, you have 113, 91,000. So again, their interest is not going to be the big factor here. You may not have any at all. Good questions.
Yes, at the beginning of the meeting, the board president gave us a list of the five most popular things from the membership pay. Oh, all right. Of the top 5 things that the membership would like to have, were any figures researched, or let's say those 5 things into these figures, or would those 5 things be additional expense to get those things?
I believe in the long-range planning committee, when we looked at just the general figure of replacing the building, it would be at today's cost. And we looked at what is the square footage, what are the amenities that it entails. And if the membership said we don't want to do anything a whole lot bigger than that, or a lot more amenities in there, a lot more expensive amenities, then we would keep that replacement in this fund, in this capital reserve fund initiative. And that's exactly what came back from the members. I mean, there were like some wild ideas that came back, but the top 5 to 10 items were pretty much the same square footage, just a little bit difference in the size and the depth of the pool. They wanted 0 entry for handicapped people to be able to walk at a level into the pool instead of stairs. They wanted Wi-Fi in the adult recreation area. They wanted to keep the same pool table, ping pong tables, nothing more, nothing less. If you remember, we asked the question about, is the size of the adult recreation area in that building sufficient? And they were like, it doesn't need to be any larger. Some of it is used for coffee hour, some of it's used for card playing, some of it's used for those games, and some people just don't want to do anything like that in there. They just wanted an area to sit and use their computers with available Wi-Fi. And then they looked at the food retail. People don't want, I think in the top 10, some people wanted a sit-down restaurant, which is very, very difficult to support at Sandy Pines. But the majority, I think it was a large part, about 700 of those people, said we just want a retail outlet, food outlet, that is like sandwiches, salads, pizza by the slice, and those kinds of deli foods available. And they'd like to be able to drive up to that window versus walk in. Those were like the top 5 or 10 items in that survey. Answer your question?
Question, if this all goes through, when are you looking at replacing that building? Would that be soon, like in 2 years, or?
That was spelled out in the plan. Go ahead.
It's one of those things that just recently has raised its head. I mentioned it at the last board meeting, but that was set for 2020, 2021 to replace it. However, about 3 weeks ago, Ben came to me, who's our maintenance manager, and said, we really need to see you over at the indoor pool. Some of the pictures that we had earlier running are from that building. What we found a few weeks ago was that the window wall on the west side is bowing in, and that end is settling down further, and the foundation wall is cracked on both corners, the front corner and the back corner, and it's beginning to tip more. So rather than a layman's look at it, we asked the engineering firm that did a report for us 2 years ago that Marty referred to, that went into the long-range committee. We had them come back out last week, and when I asked her, if we could get 4 or 5 years or 2, 3 years, she said 2 years could be a stretch. So what we're getting from them now is options. Her explanation to me is that she could see deterioration in the last 2 years. However, she said you can't assume that it's going to be a straight line deterioration because at some point it could become a J, where all of a sudden it'll drop off, and you really have to watch it. Right now, we've told our management team to monitor the wind speeds coming out of the west, and if we get anything over 30 miles an hour, we're going to clear the pool. Until we know what we can do and what it will cost to do it, up to and including closing it. So that building has deteriorated faster than we had anticipated, and that's why it's further up. That remains to be seen how long it's going to be going, but it's doubtful that right now, that graph up there is going to be outdated already, because I think we'll have to move that up, or close it, one or the other. So that's the latest I've got in that building.
It's a great example of what we're dealing with in terms of moving things around. The total doesn't change necessarily, but the timing of it does, which could impact interest a little bit. But again, if we borrow money sooner, you're still going to pay it off sooner as well. The end point on all of this stays about the same.
In your conversation, you said something about the 2 buildings. I don't know whether I missed something, but I thought there was just 1 building that we're discussing.
The big numbers, there's the CCs, you've got $1.1 million in 2 different buildings.
So we're talking 3 buildings now?
Those, replace those 2 buildings in laundry, yes. You've got CC5 and CC6, each have $550,000 are in these numbers, as well as the big one, pool I talked about.
Dave, there were 3 large projects. It was the replacement of the Golden Onion building in that facility, the CCs and the roads were the 3 large projects that were in this plan.
I'm glad to clarify that, because that's something I was missing.
Sorry. Yes.
these drawings over here, is it an either or?
These are just conceptuals, there's not either or. We asked Michael Vanderwall to draw up a couple of ideas, and this is what our members can do, and they're awesome. So these, what we wind up with may be nothing like these, but then again, you know, we just wanted something to look at for folks to look at that we could envision. When you're looking across at that building now, it's a staple in the park. I mean, it's a focal point of the park. So we were just looking for some ideas on what, if that wasn't there, what would it look like, or could it look like there? So that's what they are. No, there's nothing cast in cement yet.
I just want to make a comment. My name is Steve Michael. I'm on the Finance Committee. I want to thank Gene and the board for all they've done, because I think it's really good to be planning about the future. I don't know that it's been talked about, because I meet people in the park and I say, do you know that we're talking about things like this that could affect your monthly payment or your annual payment? So I just have a couple of things I want to throw out that I haven't thrown out to the board or to other members of the Finance Committee. But my background is in accounting. I worked for Deloitte too. She used to be an auditor. And so one of the things that I'm thinking about, this is just an idea, if the fee increase was $325 a month, you know, my suggestion or an idea.
It's a year. We're not that bad.
My suggestion would be, you know, to consider maybe phasing it. So maybe it was, you know, I just came up with it over a 10-year plan. You started at $225 and worked up to $450 as a way to schedule the increase, end up with the same amount of money, and not hit everybody with a $325 a year the first year. It's just an idea. So I would call that like a phase in to the due increase. And then another thing, and I mentioned this to Gene, I haven't mentioned it to anybody else, but when we vote for things, sometimes we're not totally, the membership in general is not totally informed. So my suggestion would be, if we're going to spend a lot of money, I mean a really lot of money to do something, my suggestion would maybe, and this would take, the board would have to change the bylaws, but the federal government does this kind of a thing with big expenditures, would be that we would have to have a 2/3 vote to spend a huge amount of money for one project, instead of having 51% of the people say we're going to spend a whole lot of money, and then 49% of the population is really unhappy. So that's just my ideas.
If we could get 2/3 of our park to vote, we would be really, really happy.
Marty, you had a this someone's been waiting a while.
Yes, he just mentioned what I was going to bring up. I said we want to increase the dues $325 per year, which I think is only $325 to get what we want, what we're looking for. I think it's good investment. I think that we can very well afford a $325 increase in our dues to keep what we've got here at Sandy Pines. Thank you.
On that building foundation, has anybody looked into a process, I think it's Kent Companies, that they can pump cement under that footing and pump it back up again?
You can't fix the crack. You can't fix the crack.
Can't fix the crack.
I trust Gene's judgment. He's dug into a lot of things, and as he said, he has looked at that.
One thing I'd like to clarify is, and I thank Rudy Wojtek for the comments, but we are not increasing dues by $325. Our dues in the bylaws can only be increased by cost of living increase every year. So we have been functioning primarily on 1978 dues with a little few dollars here, $11 there, $9 there, so our dues are not increasing. Our capital that we currently pay is $200, and we're going to add an additional $325 to the capital expenditure. And we didn't mention it in any of the presentation, but this new capital, the capital dollars, the board and Jean, we have worked out that those monies need to be kept in a separate fund so that we can track that and we can publish that information so you can see where we are in the money taken in for capital expenditures to this plan. And then what are we doing every year so you can watch this happen according to the plan, separate from operations. And if you read my article during the winter about the difference between operating fund and capital fund, they are very, very different. They pay for different things, and it's outlined in our bylaws that we cannot use our operating monies unless approved by the board to shift to capital expenditures. We have to keep that separate. We owe that to the members, and the board is working with Jean to make sure that that happens. Any other questions?
I just wanted to clarify something. So we're doing 325 for the capital increase, and then we're still subjected to the cost of living for dues increase each year, right? That's what I thought.
Yes. Jean, you want to talk a little bit about the increase in dues that we've had over the past year, the cost of living increase for the last couple of years?
Yeah. Well, basically, the bylaws were changed a number of years ago to include an automatic increase that would be equivalent to or equal to the March Midwest CPI, or Consumer Price Index. Some of the things that do not include are not included in that are insurance, property taxes, and a number of other items. However, there's a lot of items that are included in it. And last year, if you look back at last year, I don't remember all the years, but I've been here since this is my 4th summer. So I believe it was the first year I was here, I think we had about a 1.2% increase. In 2014, or 2014, the first budget that I did. The 2015, we had an increase or a decrease of 0.09% or 0.9%. So with that, it stayed level. This year, the CPI went up 0.06. So we're talking, almost less than a cup of coffee at some of these coffee shops.
0.006.
Yeah. So it's been. I believe Tom Aldrich a couple years ago did a study on how much it went up in the last 10 years. Tom, you're here. Did you remember that?
How much what went up?
The CPI. How much our dues went up because of the CPI? I think it was $200, something like that, in the last 20 years.
Gene, you got to remember, I'm going to turn 80 this year.
Yeah. Well, your mother's
my memory goes about 15 minutes.
There it is. It's on the screen visually, Gene.
I don't remember what, but one, while I got the microphone, one suggestion I made, and incidentally, the board and Gene, of course, you're doing an outstanding job. You're running this operation like a business should be. When you brought up the fact that you're going to vacate a building if the winds go over 30 miles an hour, I'd say, hey, the borrowing costs aren't going to get any lower. Inflation is not going to get any. It's all going to go up. Let's front end those things and or take a look at that, and not we don't know what's going to happen in 20 and 21. Your borrowing costs could skyrocket, your inflation could go up through the roof. So if we're in that dire need, I'd take a look at it. I'm moving much quicker. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
I'm glad we asked you today because in 2021 you'll be, 85, so.
Dave, I got one over here. He's been waiting.
We even let him sit down to respond. We didn't make him stand up. So.
I'm Denise Hauk, and I'm on K241, and I've been in the park for 23 years. When we first came to the park and stuff, all of the members had to agree to new building, which I understand we still have to do. But when we're replacing a building, I think the bylaws allow for us it's considered the same as making improvements. But when we put up the new golf course, which I am all for, my boys love to golf. They don't get to golf as much as they would like to, but it wound up that we could not maintain it. We put it up, but we obviously in some way needed another $150 for another assessment to maintain and to keep it and to run it or to get it back into order. So my concerns are that there seem to be some variables. As this gentleman told us that we're going to need to maybe push up that because of the foundations and stuff. What happens, we would be borrowing a whole lot more. And so what would that do to the debt-to-income ratio, and how would it turn out? And we, that's something that's just come up right now. And did you, in some way, increase or know what the maintenance on these buildings, where you're saying that there wasn't an inflationary cost used? If we're going to start building in 2020, the cost of materials, did you use the cost that you would, that we have seen with building materials go up and everything? I'm just concerned that as we're making these investments in Sandy Pines, which we should make, that there are too many variables that could come back and really make a mess for us. If we decide that we want to build this building now, and sometimes when we have a ballot, when we did the ballot for the golf course, there was a thing in there that the board could, which we have a great board right now, that they could raise the fees for the golfing and so forth in order to keep the cost up, which we aren't even big golfers, but for those people who golf all the time, that could become another big expense as it went on, and we gave that permission to the board. So I'm just not sure when we would sign this ballot. I would like to know the very specifics of what we are agreeing to. Are we agreeing to put up these buildings, without another vote? And what would happen if we have to go into that kind of debt right now? I'm not opposed to going into the debt. I want to know, how does it turn out? Do your figures still stay solvent at what time? And are you figuring in the maintenance of what those new buildings are going to cost?
Right, thank you. Good questions. I'll start with the cost of living increase. I mentioned that the numbers that I have up here do not include increases for cost of living. So if inflation impacts the cost of a building 5 years out, then there would be a higher cost. But we also clarified that the 325, like the rest of your dues, also is impacted by cost of living. So if cost of living is up 1% a year, theoretically your construction costs would be going up 1% a year, and everything still works. I also mentioned that these are our best estimates based on best information we can collect, talking to engineering firms, whoever's most reputable in helping us with that. So they're our best guess. The inflation applied to the 325 and the rest should hopefully keep up with the increases in numbers that are specifically in there for the individual projects. So that's the cost of living piece. It's an unknown, you never know exactly. As far as the maintenance piece of that, you're going to have a newer building, it's going to have a lower maintenance cost in general. It's just no different than an old car. At some point, you're already spending money on building maintenance. When you put a new building in, the building maintenance generally is going to be lower. You're going to have more efficient utilities, which are helping your operational side. Maintenance is going to be lower. So I don't see that as being a problem. I think those are the two main issues you had, right?
If you, so the 325 would not be a set amount, it would be an amount that could have inflation to it, and that's what we would be agreeing to. Yeah.
Dave, you got a question over here.
Okay. One question, I'm a little concerned about the fact that we know that our sewer system is not going to be forced into here at all, or I've heard some stories about the lake, they're monitoring the lake levels, and if it does happen to go up higher, then we'll be forced to put in the sewer system, which I don't know if this is a concern or possibility, or if it's...
Defer to Gene.
I think I can answer that for you. We're working hand in hand and have been for the last 4 years with DEQ with respect to the replacement of the septic system over by the pump or by the dump station. We replaced that, and there really isn't much that we do around here that has to do with wastewater that we don't contact them and walk hand in hand with them on pretty much everything. We've got a good relationship with them. That being said, we have been asked to put in monitoring wells around the new septic system. So there are 3 wells, 2 on the north side and 1 on the south side that we test based on a certain protocol that have to be tested and twice a year. And they're monitoring for nitrates and those kind of things that may be leaching from the drain field. Beyond that, there's no indication from the DEQ that they will require us to do a septic system here. We had the long-range plan look at that 3 years ago, Raj. And why don't you speak to that if you don't mind?
Yeah, we checked into it and we found out that we had the DEQ interested in it, and they came down and talked to us. And the biggest thing is that the pool that we take out of your tank every week or 2 weeks, the average of your household pool is like 750. What's that? That's that word.
Bacteria levels.
Bacteria levels that are in your sewer system at your home. When they come out here and checked, ours was like 37,000. 3,700 per site, and that was because we weren't using enough of the right chemical to break down the stuff in your tanks, and that's why we say, anything that you can do to use more water and less of the stuff. So they came down and talked to us about how we could eliminate that by putting more liquid into the system, more water, and in our tanks, in our trailers. And they come up and said that as long as we are in this mode that we're in now, we would be okay. But if it got to the point that those wells turn up, like we were talking, if those wells go bad and turn up a certain number, then they would come in and say, well, you'd have to put in a sewer system. And you're talking $25–30 million to put something like that in. Like I think it was like $4,000 a site as an assessment if we had to put in sewer. But right now, they're playing ball with us and we're playing ball with them, and we're status quo and hope it stays that way.
Any other questions? Well, our goal here today was to help you become better informed about the proposal itself. And as Dave Healy indicated, the charts that he have are available from Kimberly in the office if you would like to examine the detail a little bit more. Feel free to stop by and get one of those. And I would just also like to reference the 2 handouts. If you didn't pick them up, they're by the door. It's really, really good information, and we dare you to compare the amenities we have here at Sandy Pines versus the other 9 parks that are illustrated on here and all the amenities. We're very, very proud of our park. We want to foresee keeping the legacy here at Sandy Pines for the future generations. And a lot of people have been here 40-some years, and there's a lot of us that would love to be here 40 years. So we want to keep what we have, keep our stuff protected, and we thank each one of you for attending today and showing some interest in what we're doing as a board. Thank you so much.